Hey, this is LP Giobbi, and this is how I DJ. I thought you were going to ask me, do you remember the first time you saw a DJ? Because I was like, what is going on here? The first time I saw a DJ, I came from the jam band world and I saw one person up on a stage and I was like, how is there all this sound by one person? Like, did not understand the concept. I used 3 CDJ 3000s, a V10 mixer, a DJS 1000, and a keyboard. I use the V10 mixer because they've added more channels, so I can add more synthesizers or other instruments into them. I can use a channel as a send return for an effect. So I route my keyboard into the input of the DJS, and the DJS goes into one of the channels of the mixer. I can just play the piano, or I can record in a note that I can then sequence and beat cut up, and that will be synced to what I'm playing over. I found some CDJ 800s on Craigslist, and I called my friend. I was like, can you come with me to this person's house to pick up these CDJs? And she was like, what is a CDJ? And I said, I'm not sure, but I think you need them to DJ. And so we went and picked them up, brought them back to the house, and I spent quite a few hours trying to set them up, realizing I needed to also get RCA cables and a mixer. So once that happened, I was using, CDs, and it was tragic and horrible, and really, it sounded really bad, but it was fun. I like to add elements of excitement into my builds using the piano that I'm sampling through the DJS 1000. I mix and key, and so I always have the key title as the first thing that I see on all my tracks. This allows me to mix and key and also know what key to play the piano. I sampled in a simple E, and I have it on a 4-length pattern. And it's synced to the key, the tempo of the track playing. And then I go into scale mode. And most, if it's in minor, most electronic tracks are in Dorian, sometimes Phrygian, but you could try Dorian, probably be safe. And so I start playing around until I find a pattern I like, and I record that. And then as the build is developing, I'll usually go to the high octave above note. So it's going on 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5, and just adds some effects, and then emphasizes the build. I do this when I want to add energy into the room, when I have longer sets usually, and I can really start slower and build more momentum. I have longer mixes. I can be more experimental over those tracks. I think my very first gig, I threw my own party in San Francisco at Public Works. And I DJ'd the very beginning opening of the party, so it was mostly just my friends there. And it was really electrifying I come from the band world, and I went to school for jazz piano performance, and I was in a lot of bands, and it was just really empowering to just be able to go and play music without having to first, get together a band and get other people to, come and join you on that stage. I could just step up there myself and play music. I have a crate on my stick that is just acapellas and instrument loops that are keyed, so that I can put those acapellas or instrument loops over different tracks.
Keep my hands on myself. Pick up dust and more, put them back up on the shelf. Kiss my little baby girl is in need. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Leaving with the baby, said her mama gonna grave digger. Gone with the falling leaves. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might have had your fill, but I feel it still.
I like to separate the vocal that I'm going to use from the track because it gives me more control in different rooms. We'll have different frequencies, and if I want to high pass filter out the track to emphasize the vocal, it just gives me more flexibility. You need to make sure that they're warped correctly, which is something that I would, check in Ableton or Record Box before you play it. You need to make sure they're in the right key. So the great thing about the CDJ 3000s is that you can repitch things. You don't want to go maybe too far off just because people maybe are familiar with hearing that vocal sound a certain way. You don't usually generally want two vocals over each other unless it's very intentional and they're filling in gaps, but generally that would be harder to really nail on the spot. But it's a nice way to, if you're wanting to play a little bit more underground, but you're feeling the dance floor get anxious, having a crate of acapellas that they might know or feel familiar with helps to draw them back in so that you can then go back to pushing them a little bit with the music that you love. I think that ravers and dancers do get excited to see an instrument, which feels really good because it is my first love. The reaction is always really positive and pumps me up and fuels me to play more and get better. So if I want to add some energy into a mix-in, I will take the track that is going to be mixing out, and as the one that is coming in has a nice sort of little break or build up, I will loop the first track, just a 4-beat loop, and then I will start beat cutting it up. I'll make sure that the jog wheel is on light. I'll add some shimmer to it, and I will backspin out of it as the drop for the next track happens. When I first started out, I was very, very, very small DJ, and so backline was not necessarily covered besides the CDJs. So my amazing tour manager would carry a keyboard everywhere we went, so we'd have to check that, and it's quite heavy to carry through an airport night after night. Then eventually we were able to get that included in the backline, and so, but with that comes, sometimes it's a different keyboard pretty much every night, and kind of quickly learning the ins and outs of that is always a fun challenge. Like, where are the effects? Why does it sound like a synth and not a piano right now? And quickly having to do that in a loud club. It's a fun challenge. And the first channel is I made an edit of playing in the band. So that's the sort of the bed of the music. Later on you'll hear, I'll skip forward so you can hear it. Some folks good for dancing, but there's not for fights. I know where that vocal is going to come in, and so I have on another CJ the guitar part from Morning Dew, which is in the same key as playing in the band. So that I will layer on top at the beginning of that track. I'll add reverb, phaser, very 60s when this music came out. And then in the other CDJ, I have the vocal for Morning Dew. Walk me out in the morning dew, my honey. And so this allows me to throw that in and out when I want. I can loop some of the lyrics if I want. It just gives me a little bit more control of how I want to be sort of live remixing these. And then in the DJS, my favorite part, I have preloaded Jerry Garcia samples that I've worked and I know the pitch of. So here is the isolated guitar. And then you can go to Hot Slice and cut that sample up. Add some effects to make it a little bit tastier. and then record a sequence if you want over a 16 beat phrase sequence. So some advice I'm giving myself currently is I'm trying to have my younger self give me advice. Because my younger self was fearless and ignorant, and that fear and ignorance is what allowed me to pursue this career and believe I could do it. And we all need a little bit of that, you know, and as it sort of started to grow a little bit, I think I take less risks or overthink things or overcomplicate things. But like thinking back to that little girl who just thought anything was possible, I think that's a really great place to operate from. You have to operate from that place because anything is possible. If it can happen to me, it can truly happen to anybody.